In 1958, Sports Illustrated called it the greatest game ever played, the NFL championship between the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants. It took the NFL from just another league to America's favorite sport.
United to Amici. Amici powers in. The Colts win.
Tonight, 50 years to the day, ABC2 Sports and Press Box look back at the greatest game.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a special one-hour look at the greatest game ever played. Scott Garceau at Sports Legends Museum, along with my partner from ABC2, Jamie Costello, and the founder of Pressbox, Stan the Fan Charles. This should be a fun hour as we look back on a great game and a real slice of Baltimore history.
It really is, and Baltimore's place in NFL history is forever cemented because of this game and what came out of that.
Not the greatest game ever played, but the most important game ever played.
The most important game because, as everybody, and you'll hear it throughout the next hour, it was like a railroad stop, right? The train stopped here in Baltimore before going on to Philly, going to D.C., and then all of a sudden our lives got real good after 58. But let me tell you, have you noticed that the people here in Baltimore have really taken on to this 50th anniversary?
Absolutely.
I mean, everywhere you go.
It's been absolutely amazing.
I bet you I play the Cold Fight song, you'll break down right now, won't you?
John Zeman will, I know that, our good friend. But it was a special time. College football was king in 1958. The Orioles and Colts were relatively new in town, and that year and that game changed it all.
And it changed it all. We were going to take a look back at 1958. You remember where you were, you remember where you were, you remember where you were. And you know what? It's a great time to catch up on 50 years. It all comes back. You really need to be 58 and older to remember when we bought our Philips console TV from Chesapeake Furniture and switched from the Collegians and Buddy Dean to watch this game in houses on streets named Milton and Poppleton. A new home would run you $12,000. It all comes back when we were making $4,600 at places like Continental Can, Procter & Gamble, The Point. Our life was Unitas to Barry. Before everybody went to Gino's, there was Amici's. And before that, we bought a nice T-bone steak for $5 over at Wilhelm's, or had a bushel of crabs at the House of Neptune. It all comes back. When we went to high school at Poly, Patterson, and City, went to the Maryland State Teachers College at Towson, we drove a Chevy Impala out to the country, to Berg's, on Joppa Road, for ice cream. If you wanted to go to the beach, you had to take Light Street down Ritchie Highway and cross the Kent Narrows Drawbridge, and nothing was past 29th Street in Ocean City. It all comes back about the faces and the friends that we made. We shopped at Hoschel's on Howard, enjoyed a cold one at Doodah's, Sweeney's, Gussie's, and American Joe's, and then it was 2 o'clock and time to go see Blaze Starr. The Visa credit card was born in 58, so was the hula hoop and Sweet and Low. Nelson Mandela married Winnie. The Chipmunk song was #1 on the charts. But in Baltimore, where Tommy the Elder ruled, it's all local. That's why Barry Levinson made Diner. That's why we still get chills over the Colt Fight song. Your grandfather, to your dad, to you, telling stories of Gino's broken leg, or Weed punching Sam Huff in the face, or Artie telling Gifford to get back in the huddle. And it was always Unitas to Barry. And when the horse dropped his shoulder into Yankee Stadium's end zone, we became something. It all comes back to 58. 58. 50 years went by in a hurry, didn't it?
Like
a lot
that?
of catching up to do. Look at us now. What do you remember?
We're much older now.
Yeah.
Where were you 50 years ago, Stan?
Well, I had just moved to Baltimore in August of 58. My dad died in January, and I remember that day because I was a big baseball fan. And I was also a Redskin fan way back then. I know that's terrible to admit.
Get 'em out of
But
here.
I was from
Security.
Washington. But I remember that day, I could not find anybody to play with, anybody to talk to. It was like a ghost town on Gist Avenue that day. I really remember that vividly.
I was in Michigan 7 years old, and what I remember, it was right after Christmas, and we had a family tradition where you would visit friends during the holidays, maybe compare Christmas presents and have a drink or something to eat. And we were at the Jacobsons' house, and I don't remember a lot about the game. I was 7 years old, but I do remember when the game went off TV. My dad and Mr. Jacobson jumped and screamed and hollered, where did the game go? It was just static on the TV. And I remember that probably because of my dad's reaction and Mr. Jacobson's reaction. But the game came back, and we got to see the Colts win in overtime.
And because of that game, they've never been off again.
Yeah, right. That's right.
And the interesting story about that is the legend is, and I guess it's true, when the game went off the air, NBC, what are we going to do? And apparently it looked like a drunk running around on the field, but they had sent an NBC executive out on the field to run around, hold up the game while they tried to get the signal back.
That was Jay Leno.
Eventually they did.
You know what?
Where were you?
I wasn't around, but
Okay.
my first autograph, Johnny U at the Hex on Howard. And he was
yeah.
by. We went in there, and there's a line. I got his autograph, and my first handshake was with Bill Pellington at the Iron Horse. And I already remember he used to have these pumpernickel bread rolls. They were about that big. And
Did he hit you?
He shook my hand, and it was like, Stan. Bill Pellington's hand was about out to here.
There were some big hands back then.
It was unbelievable.
I'll tell you,
Bill Pellington was Mike Curtis before Mike Curtis.
Exactly. I'll tell you, the only thing, I was talking to a good friend of mine who we all know, Bob Footlick from Bond Distributing. He said the only thing missing from this celebration is Johnny U. Yeah, it just doesn't feel right without him.
Well, earlier this week on The Fan, we had some clips of John from the game talking about the drive, and boy, it just brought back memories to hear his voice. But we do have some special guys that were part of that game. They're going to be with us. What better way to celebrate 50 years than to hear from Art Donovan and Jim Mutscheller, who played a key role in that big Colts win in 1958.
And you know what? All of you out there with memorabilia, you have the program, you've got the game ticket, you've got some goalpost stuff. We're going to see how much it costs today, in today's life, to see what this memorabilia, and if you have it at home, what you should do with it.
Yeah, and here in Baltimore, we think of Art Modell as the guy that brought football back to town. When he moved the Browns to Baltimore, we got the game back after a 12-year absence. But he's more than that. Art, of course, had a lot to do with Monday Night Football kicking off. But he was also at the 1958 Colts-Giants game, probably the largest season ticket holder in Giants history. So we're going to hear from Art, get his take on the greatest game ever played. That's coming up right here on ABC2. But before we go to break, here's a press box fact from the 1958 game. The championship game had an official attendance of 64,185 and an estimated combined radio and television audience of 45 million. Now compare that to Super Bowl 42 last February, where over 71,000 people were in attendance, and an estimated 97.5 million people watched the game, a record for any Super Bowl.